Anthony Floyd Wainwright. Crime committed at age 23. Executed in Florida on June 10, 2025. In the pre-dawn hours of April 22, 1994, Anthony Wainwright and his accomplice pulled into the Winn-Dixie parking lot in Lake City, Florida. Spotting 23-year-old nursing student Carmen Gayhart returning to her car after closing shift, they emerged from the shadows, forced her into the back seat, and sped off. Over miles of rural backroads, they bound her wrists with zip ties and covered her mouth to stifle her cries. Once they reached a dense pine forest, the pair carried out a brutal sequence of assaults. Gayhart was struck repeatedly with a concrete block, fracturing her skull. Witnesses later described hearing a single gunshot in the distance, the fatal culmination of Wainwright's violence. The prosecution at his Columbia County trial presented fibers from the block's fabric caught on Wainwright's jacket and testimony from a passing trucker who spotted the tourist's car moments after the abduction. Following a 2-day deliberation, the jury recommended death. Over the next 31 years, Wainwright pursued appeal after appeal, claiming ineffective counsel, newly discovered witness statements, and cruel conditions on Florida's death row. Each petition was denied, even after the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear his case. In his final days, Wainwright met nightly with a prison chaplain, penned letters of apology to Gayhart's family, and quietly rehearsed the Lord's Prayer. At 9:15 p.m. on June 10th, he lay on the gurney at Florida State Prison and offered a soft, "I'm sorry," before the lethal cocktail is administered. 8 minutes later, at age 54, he was pronounced dead. Gregory Hunt. Crime committed at age 28. Executed in Alabama on June 10, 2025. On August 2, 1988, neighbors in Cordova, Alabama were awakened by terrifying screams. By the time police arrived at Karen Lane's apartment, she lay bloodied and bound, a heavy lampstand shattered nearby. Medical examiners cataloged more than 40 separate injuries: blunt force trauma, defensive wounds on her hands, and ligature marks indicating prolonged strangulation. During the 1989 Jefferson County trial, prosecutors laid out a chilling narrative of obsession. Hunt, winging a false apology under the guise of repairing a broken light, then assaulted Lane for over an hour. Jurors saw crime scene photographs depicting the lampstand's fabric fibers embedded in Lane's hair, tying Hunt directly to the murder weapon. Found guilty of capital murder, he received an automatic death sentence. For 37 years on Alabama's death row, Hunt became an exemplar of penitence. He earned his GED, taught literacy classes to fellow inmates, and led weekly Bible studies. In February 2025, he formally waived all remaining appeals and chose nitrogen hypoxia, the least traumatic execution option under state law. At exactly 6:26 p.m. CDT on June 10th, the inert gas flowed into the sealed chamber. 4 minutes later, monitors indicated a complete cessation of brain activity. When medical staff confirmed death, Hunt's final act was silent prayer. He was 64. John Fitzgerald Hansen. Crime committed at age 35. Executed in Oklahoma on June 12, 2025. Late on May 14, 1999, Hansen and an accomplice lay in wait outside Tulsa's Promenade Mall. When 77-year-old Mary Bowles exited the department store, Hansen grabbed her purse strap, yanked her toward the awaiting car, and shoved her inside. He bound her hands behind her back with twine and instructed his partner to ensure no witnesses approached. By sunrise, Bowles' body lay in an abandoned industrial field. She had been shot twice at close range, once in the chest, once behind the ear. Moments later, when 82-year-old Gerald Thurman, a local retiree, stumbled upon the scene, Hansen shot him without hesitation. At trial, ballistic experts matched both bullets to Hansen's revolver by microscopic striation patterns, and his accomplice testified in graphic detail about the plan and execution. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before convicting Hansen on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Hansen's appellate strategy hinged on disputing the state's jurisdiction over his federal to state custody transfer, but every court upheld the sentence. In his final statement, he expressed deep regret, apologized to the victims' families, and described fleeting remorse. I failed everyone who trusted me. At 8:33 p.m. on June 12, 2025, the three-drug cocktail commenced at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. 11 minutes later, Hansen was declared dead at age 61. Stephen Christopher Stanko. Crime committed at age 37. Executed in South Carolina on June 13, 2025. In June 2005, Laura Ling and her teenage daughter awoke to the silhouette of Stephen Stanko looming in their apartment hallway. Within minutes, Ling was strangled with a shirt cord as her daughter watched in terror. Stanko then assaulted the child before fleeing. That same evening, he drove to Georgetown County and broke into Henry Lee Turner's home, shooting the 74-year-old retiree 3 times to avoid detection. CC Department of Corrections investigators traced shell casings from both scenes to a single Glock handgun registered in Stanko's name. In separate trials spanning 2006 and 2009, witnesses described Ling's final moments, and forensic psychologists testified about Stanko's escalating violence. Juries returned consecutive death sentences for murder, rape, kidnapping, and burglary. Denied clemency in March 2025, Stanko spent his final 90 days in Broad River's segregation wing. He declined special visitation privileges, but submitted a written apology acknowledging the pain and fear he caused. On June 13th, his final request was simple: no fuss, no words. At 7:42 p.m., a lethal injection began. 4 minutes later, Stanko, aged 57, ceased breathing. Thomas Lee Goodiness. Crime committed at age 19. Scheduled for execution in Florida on June 24, 2025. In the early morning of May 3, 1994, Michelle McGrath left an Orlando nightclub where she'd met Thomas Lee Goodiness. A patron's security footage later captured the pair walking toward a dark alley outside the venue. There, Goodiness bound her wrists, dragged her behind a dumpster, and inflicted multiple gunshot wounds, one piercing her brainstem instantly. Investigators discovered Goodiness's fingerprints on the bar's glassware and a single shell casing at the alley. At his 1995 trial, jurors heard expert testimony on the brutality of the crime and reviewed psychological assessments diagnosing Goodiness with antisocial personality disorder. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. His appeals argued mental health mitigating factors, but successive Florida Supreme Court rulings left the sentence intact. On June 8, 2025, the court denied his final relief motion. Goodiness now awaits lethal injection at Florida State Prison, scheduled for June 24. He has chosen no last meal and requested silence during his final hours. At that point, he will be exactly 50 years old and more than 31 years removed from the crime. Richard Gerald Jordan. Crime committed at age 29. Scheduled for execution in Mississippi on June 25, 2025. On January 12, 1976, Jordan donned a utility dash company uniform and knocked on Edwina Martyr's front door in Gulfport, Mississippi. Claiming a meter check, he coaxed her outside, then forced her into his truck at gunpoint. He drove deep into the DeSoto National Forest, where he fatally shot her in the back of the head. Afterwards, he placed a ransom call to Martyr's husband, who alerted police rather than paying. This phone call proved Jordan's undoing. Triangulated by officers, it led to his arrest within hours. His 1977 trial resulted in a death sentence under Mississippi's capital murder statute. Over nearly 5 decades, the state's evolving death penalty laws triggered 4 retrials, each ending with Jordan again facing death row. His case set multiple precedents on procedural due process and jury instruction standards. In March 2025, Mississippi's highest court upheld the latest sentencing scheme, and the governor signed the execution warrant. Jordan is now slated for lethal injection at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility on June 25th. At 78, he will have spent 49 consecutive years under a cloud of execution, a record span among U.S. inmates.